everybody, this is Karen, and today we're going to talk about university life, and we have a very special guest. This is Xue, and so I met Xue earlier this year when she moved from Michigan, and she is a software engineer here at Tesla, and so I met her through my cousin Jeff, and she is a influencer on LinkedIn, so make sure you follow her for great career content, but I'm going to pass it over to you and give you a chance to introduce yourself.
So I'm Xue. I work at Tesla as a software engineer. I also serve on the leadership team at Boba Talks. And I'm really passionate about helping others, especially students in earlier career. I like helping them with stuff like resume reviews, mock interviews, just general networking stuff, helping them figure out what their career is going to look like. I call it pathfinding, really.
Cool. So yes, we have very similar interests, which is why we're here today. So Boba Talks is very big on helping students, part of that as well. So maybe we can get started with, where were you a student? Where did you study?
I went to a school in Michigan called Grand Valley State University. And I studied there for around 4 years. I majored in electrical and computer engineering. And I graduated end of 2021, I think. Where did you go?
So I went to the University of Calgary, so that's back home in Canada. And I stayed local, so I've always wanted to go somewhere abroad, but then I decided ultimately to pay off student loans quicker. That's why I decided to stay local. And I went to the Haskell School of Business.
Yeah, I did not do software engineering.
Maybe you can kind of give us a little insight into how did you end up as a software engineer at Tesla?
It goes back to when I was 8 or something, I think. I was playing this game called Neopets. And
Neopets.
Did you play that?
I
Okay. So there's this part of the website. There's so many things to do on that game, but there's this part of the game that you can create pages like HTML and CSS pages. You couldn't do JavaScript, but you could do HTML and CSS. And I would spend hours making these layouts. And then after that, I grew up a little bit. I went to Tumblr.
Yes,
and I would make layouts
too.
as well, and I think I did WordPress a little bit, but I would sell these layouts. I would freelance or sell them at a young age, and then it started being a professional thing. As I grew older, I had more clients, and I had a waiting list and things like that, but I never took it seriously because I always thought it was just a fun, for fun thing.
Mm-hmm.
But then I got my job at Herman Miller as an electrical engineer, as a controls engineer. And literally all I did there was basically software engineering, because I wasn't the only one who could code on the team, but I was the one who was doing that the most. So pretty much what I was doing there was software engineering. And then I decided you know what, I want to take this seriously, so I pivoted into software. Got a software engineering job at Herman Miller after I graduated.
We kind of skipped ahead a little bit and talked about your internship, which is pretty interesting.
Yeah.
How would you say, being a student, what was the biggest thing in helping you get an internship?
I did a co-op, so I don't know. Are there co-ops?
Yeah, I did a co-op as well.
Okay,
so maybe you can explain a little bit about
So
that.
it's kind of similar to an internship, except it's more of a longer commitment, I feel, and there's specific things that they have to hit with their relationship with the school.
Mm-hmm.
So how did I get my internship? It was really hard. I was an international student, so I really struggled with that during career fairs and things like that. I went to career fairs, I sent out my resumes, I did everything right, but it wasn't really right. I didn't do networking, I didn't optimize my resume or anything like that. But it was pretty hard, and then I think I got my co-op through sort of networking almost.
Mm-hmm.
I reached out to the recruiter who I met at one of the talks that they gave at my school. I introduced myself and I gave them my resume, and then I followed up with him 3 times.
Nice.
And then by the 3rd time, he's yeah, there's a position, in that interview for the position. And on my resume, I had all that coding stuff that I was talking about, and then they were really interested in that. And they were we have the perfect project for you.
Wow.
So that's how I got my internship. Where did you intern at or co-op at?
You joined Husky Energy. The company got acquired by Synovus, but it's all oil and gas because I'm from Alberta. It was really interesting entering the oil and gas sector when it was kind of a recession.
Cool.
Mm-hmm.
Oil and gas, that's where I hear where the money's at.
Yeah, I mean, it was pretty good as a student, right? I think overall internships are such a great experience because you're gaining practical experience, but then you're also making money. and that you can use to, pay off your student loans sooner if you're smart, which is not something that I did. I used it for bubble tea and sushi with my friends.
Yeah, I did end up paying like some of my tuition with my co-op money. Yeah,
Smart.
Yeah, I did do that because I don't want to graduate with like a ton of debt.
Yeah, I mean, in America, that is a more prominent problem, I would say. Not that it isn't in Canada, but schooling back home, I would say, is a lot more affordable.
Yeah.
Just depending where you go. But I mean, one of the best things I did with my internship money was I saved up for my last semester in Singapore. So
that's awesome. Yeah, it's really funny that you like went to where I was back,
exactly.
Pretty much.
Yeah.
And I would come here. That's really funny. So I had a question with the internship stuff. Did you like feel like it prepared you really well for like the real world, or like you said, it gave you a lot of good experience, but did it really prepare you to enter the workforce?
Yes, like 100%. I think an internship was one of the best decisions I made in university. In fact, when I first started, I was never going to do one because I was like, I'm just going to graduate in 4 years and I'll get a full-time job and I'll be good to go. But then I had a mentor back in university. He was like in his 4th year, I was in my 1st year. And he was like, no, you need practical experience because when you graduate, there's going to be thousands of other business students just like you. And like, how are you going to differentiate yourself? And I was like, that is a very good point. So it really encouraged me to apply for the internship, like the co-op program. And then once I got my internship, it opened my eyes into so much. Like now I knew how the corporate world worked. Now I'm meeting people who are giving me such great advice on what to do with my career. Like for me, it was a really great opportunity to just see how things worked outside of the classroom. And it's so different. So if there's anybody out there who's a student and you are trying to figure out what to do with your life, like go get an internship because you're gonna find out really soon.
Yeah, so for my school, I remember that one of the reasons that I picked that school was also because they had a mandatory co-op program.
Oh, wow.
So my co-op was like non-negotiable. Like, you cannot graduate without a co-op. I think for COVID,
every school had that.
I think for COVID, they didn't even lift the restrictions at all. Even though the market was so bad, they put you through like a co-op prep class, which everybody hated, like I enjoyed it, but everybody else was like, this is garbage, like this is all common sense. But I learned a lot because one of the reasons I do my mentorship stuff is the audience or the people that I target or focus on is people who come from more underprivileged backgrounds. So what I mean by that is people or students who don't necessarily have like the connections growing up, or because they're so busy studying, or they just never learn, they don't have like parents with connections or things like that. So those are the people that I'm trying to help, and so for me, like I didn't have like a ton of work experience either. I worked a little bit, but I didn't have a lot of work experience. I used to do like yoga stuff, and also the US like culture is so different. So that co-op program really helped me open my eyes to like understand what it's like to work in the US and form my own connections, even though I had to start from scratch. So yeah, I encourage you guys to do it as well. People like always complain that like it's a waste of time because they graduate later, right?
Yeah.
It's so not. It will set you apart from your competition. Like even from my school, where everybody who graduated from my school had 12 months of experience under their belt, they really have to make the most of it. And it really helped differentiate them from other students from like bigger universities, bigger name universities who had like great grades and everything, but no experience.
Yes, I totally agree. So like for myself, University of Calgary, it's like a good university. Like I had an amazing experience, but it's not like University of Toronto or University of British Columbia, right? Like those were kind of like the top dogs in Canada that everyone wanted to go to. But I think having my internship experience really like created a path for me to get to Microsoft, because after my 12-month internship, my company created a position for me to continue working. And so I was able to be like a contractor for another 2 years. And so I just started like consulting around different parts of the company, doing SharePoint projects, training people on how to use SharePoints. And that was really eye-opening. And it gave me a lot of cool experiences to just meet different people around the company as well.
Wait, was this At Microsoft or Husky?
Husky.
Okay.
Yeah, so
So you were training people on SharePoint, which is a Microsoft thing, right?
Yeah, exactly. So
okay.
it was like the one thing that I became really good at as an intern.
Mm-hmm.
And then I started like consulting different teams on how to use SharePoint properly. I helped them with projects, and then eventually started training all the administrators across the company. And then, yeah, I mean, even to this day at Microsoft, I still use SharePoint. So, okay, back to university life. You did internships, and that really helped you figure out that you were interested in software engineering. And then, what about when it comes to like extracurriculars?
Okay.
Like, did you do anything throughout your university that was like a favorite memory or favorite experience?
So I joined like sports teams and things like that in my freshman year. So I had a scholarship, so that's why I had to do it. It really was such a struggle balancing between school and like all these other activities I was doing. I had to drop so many of them. Like I probably dropped like, I think I was in like 4 clubs and I had to drop 3.
Dang.
And the remaining club I was in, I was barely active in because I was just studying all the time. So I didn't spend a ton of time in extracurriculars, honestly, so I'm pretty boring like that. I was trying to like make sure everything came from the engineering school. So if we were, instead of hanging out with friends, like doing stuff with them, we would all just study together and I would consider them friend time.
Oh my god.
And then I dated a guy who was in my engineering school and, you know, we would like hang out, but really we would be doing homework and, you know, that would be our dates. It's because I didn't have time to do stuff like that.
You're so nerdy.
I am. I really just studied all the time, but it was also because like I struggled in school a little bit and I feel like it takes a lot of work for me to perform at the level everyone is at. And I feel like engineering school is just like where all the smarties go to. Yeah, and everyone's like super competitive and like they always like have to get A's for everything. So I kind of had that drilled into me. So yeah, so I didn't do a ton of extracurriculars.
I was super active in extracurriculars. I think when I was in my first year, I joined like 3 different clubs. And then I like stayed on, eventually became VP, eventually became president later on in my university life. And it was just a really good experience for me to lead teams and kind of flex those leadership teamwork skills that are always so important outside of the classroom. And so for me, I really enjoyed it because I kind of came into the orgs or the student clubs trying to figure out, okay, what's happening here? Like, what are we trying to achieve? And then when I became like an exec, it was like, okay, how do we actually achieve this and make it revolutionary? And so one of my favorite projects was when I was in like my final-ish year of university and we had to run a 5-day leadership conference for like 200-300 students across Canada. And it was through ISEC Canada, which I'm very fond of. So ISEC is the largest student-run nonprofit organization in the world. I have that drilled into my head. But we do international exchanges.
Oh.
So we have like local chapters all around the world, and people like basically volunteer and work abroad through the ISEC chapters.
Okay.
So for example, I had a lot of friends who volunteered abroad in Taiwan and taught English. And then we had people around the world who came to Canada and did internships here and worked at companies in the local businesses. Every year we have this national leadership conference, and so my team was running it and we were planning it. That was probably the most stressful time of my university career because I was doing school, I was doing my internship at Husky, and I was planning a $200,000 conference. And it was a huge feat, but we ended up raising almost $100,000 of sponsorship.
Damn.
We had a really successful conference. Like everyone told us, it was one of the best experiences that they've ever had. And so it definitely was like the highlight of my year.
Damn.
And then I went to Singapore. So that
was
a cherry on top.
Wow. That's amazing.
It was fun.
I did not do any of that.
I mean, but you're still at Tesla, so you focus on your studies, which I think is important. But how did you overcome GPA versus experience? Because sometimes I feel like people over-index on GPA, and I'm one of those people. I was always like, I need to be top of my class, and oftentimes I would put in those extra efforts so that I would get that A, but ultimately when I came out of university, I realized that maybe I didn't really have to because I already had so much other experience. Yeah, how did you like approach GPA versus everything else, or was it just GPA for you?
For me, it was just like getting the degree.
Okay, fair.
I definitely don't have a 4.0. I don't even think it's above a 3.8 right now, or like when I graduated. So I didn't check what my graduating GPA was. I just didn't. I don't want that in my head. The last time I checked, it was like pretty close to where I wanted it to be. But then I think I got a B minus or something like that, and I just didn't want to look at it ever again because I was one of those people.
Oh,
but
yes,
anyway,
stop. No, I mean I was upset when I got a B minus, so I know I know the feeling.
And you worked so hard in that class, probably too, right?
I did.
Yeah,
Yes.
yeah. So it was really disappointing. But anyway, so I think so. The advice that I give people is try to at least keep it above a 3.0. But like, sometimes you aim for 3.0 and you like shoot a little bit under. So I say like maybe 3.5 or something.
Mm-hmm.
So like aim to keep it like as high as you possibly can. Put in the effort to maintain that, because some companies, especially for internships, do filter out on that. Mm-hmm. Like after your first job, like nobody's going to look at your GPA. Like if you put your GPA on your resume after like
it's not needed.
Sometime at like a company, then you don't really need that anymore. It's not relevant. It's just one signal out of many signals. And that's what I usually tell students about GPA. It's like, if it's like really stressing you out and like it's killing you like mentally, like, don't stress too much about it. Just try your best to keep it at a reasonable grade. Some people struggle with studying, obviously, like everybody has different strengths and weaknesses. And then like work on your projects, work on your experience, like internships and things like that. Mm-hmm. I think those can really help, especially if you have a lower GPA. Those can really, really help you, because I've had many students who come with like maybe like around 2.7-ish GPA. Like they really pad it with like projects and showcasing their experiences, and that really helps. That really does make a difference.
Like, even when I talk to hiring managers, they're like, if I'm looking at two candidates, one has like a 4.0 GPA but no experience. The other has maybe like a 3.5, but then they have internships or extracurriculars. Like that's somebody that I want on my team, because it shows they have growth mindset, right? And they have skills beyond the classroom. And I think that's so important, because as soon as you graduate, everything's beyond the classroom, right? Yeah. So like the theory, all that shit you're learning in class, it's not always that relevant.
Speaking from my experience of being in engineering, I'm sure there's majors out there where it's like super important.
Yeah, I think that's so in business. Like if you're trying to get into like consulting, I feel like you definitely need a super high GPA. And so like for me, I think I would not have gotten an interview at McKinsey if I didn't have like a super high GPA.
Yeah, there's definitely like biases out there.
Exactly.
But yeah, it's not the end of the world if you don't have like a 4.0. Like I said, it's really not the end of the world. If you do have a 4.0 but you don't have like extracurriculars or projects, or just something that shows that you have experience, like applied knowledge experience, I think that could hurt you. Because I see a lot of students who put their GPA, who have really high GPAs, and then they put their classes on their resume. And it doesn't really tell you as an interviewer or like a hiring manager anything beyond that they did well in the class.
Yeah, exactly.
So like, instead of that, if you're in that category, I would put like what you did in that class on the resume, and say like any projects that you did from the class.
Projects. Yeah,
instead of just putting the class on there, because that's not really helpful information for like a hiring manager.
I mean, I think that's really good advice. And there are so many things to think about when it comes to the university experience, and everyone approaches it differently and has a different journey. So for you, like as we kind of wrap up this podcast, what would you have done differently if you were to go back to?
I don't live with no regrets. I would start networking earlier. I did naturally develop relationships with the people around me, but maybe focusing more on like what I can do for them as much as what they can do for me. Yeah. I would probably practice that a lot more. Like really getting into that mindset a little bit earlier. Yeah. Because if I had planted the seeds like as early as I could in like university, in high school, whenever, if I could do that, then I feel like I would be a little bit more ahead in life, in the sense of like having people to turn to when I need help. Like, even if it's just asking for advice, you know, I didn't really do that. I would just have these like passing interactions, passing relationships, and then they would just walk in and out of my life, and they didn't really like, I didn't gain anything from it, and they didn't gain anything from it other than like a passing interaction. And that's fine. I'm not saying that every relationship or interaction has to like benefit me in some way, but just being cognizant of that, I feel like would have helped me a little bit more, because I did struggle a lot because I didn't have any connections and didn't have any like people I could turn to a lot of the times, because I felt very isolated and alone here. But it's better now. Yeah, but I have you. But yeah. What would you do differently?
So I think I pondered my university experience a lot, and ultimately I would say I had the best university experience I could have ever asked for. Like, hands down, it was not what I expected, but it was amazing. And I wouldn't change anything, but I think the one thing I would change, like if you really pushed me on the question, it would be kind of taking away the pressure that I needed to have like a major or a concentration. Because when I first enrolled, I was like, oh, marketing, because it's so interesting. And then at a certain point, I was like, well, I want to try other things too. Like, there's a lot of other things that are interesting to me. Of course, not accounting, and of course, not finance, but other things like business negotiations, you know, international business, that kind of stuff. And so I really struggled with, like, do I just continue on this path of marketing, or do I become a generalist? And I was very taken aback when I talked to my mentors, and they were like, become a generalist. They were the ones who pushed me to go abroad, because they were like, it's more important to get that experience, that international experience, than to just stay back and do your concentration, because you have to do the classes. And so I think that really helped me. Like, it was some of the best advice that I got, and I definitely don't regret it. Like graduating with a Bachelor of Commerce as a general student versus Bachelor of Commerce with like a marketing degree or something.
Okay. I have a follow-up question. I know we're wrapping up, but so like in Canada, it's 3 years, right? Instead of 4 years? 4 years? Okay.
No.
Okay, so like, are all of your classes related to, like, once you pick a major, it's like 100% all related to your major, or is there like gen eds like we do?
Yeah, so once you choose your concentration, then you have to take like required courses in that discipline or in that concentration. But then of course you have electives and options that you take on the side as well.
In the US here, I had to take like philosophy.
Oh, I did too.
And like gender studies.
Oh, interesting. Yeah, those would fall under like electives
and other stuff like that. You know, but we had to like fulfill these categories that we did.
Same.
Okay. Okay, that's interesting.
It is, but I felt like switching to general studies just made it so much easier, because then I could take anything under those categories versus it had to be like marketing related. So for me, it opened up doors to study abroad because it was a lot more flexible.
Awesome. Wow, we could do like a whole video on this. I'm really curious.
Yeah. Honestly. And then you came from Malaysia, so maybe if you could give a little inspiration to students who are outside of North America, like what was the path like? What was like the biggest thing that you tried that got you to the US? You mentioned before that you were in like a transfer program. Would you say that's like the best way for students who are interested in going abroad?
Yeah, so I was in a transfer program from a different college that transferred over to this US college. I think there's like a similar program around the world, you know? And I would definitely choose that path for a bunch of reasons, like financial reasons, and like just understanding if this is something that you really want to do before you pack your bags and then go somewhere else. So I think that's a really good pathway. There's so many different pathways to get to where you want to be. Like if you do want to study abroad, if you want to do like a short-term thing or a long-term thing, if you want to graduate from that school, I think just from where I come from, or like Asia in general, we just have this like romanticized idea of studying abroad. Even if you don't have that opportunity, that's okay. Like there's tons of opportunities in your home country. You just have to like leverage them. And yeah, but I did it personally because I never felt like I was like accepted in my own country. Like I never fit in, you know? So I wanted to try something new. So that's why I decided to study abroad. It's definitely not because of a boy in America. That may have been little bit of why.
Maybe. Okay.
Yeah.
That's cool. Yeah, I think like you had such a unique journey, and it's definitely something that is inspiring to a lot of people around the world, right? Like you had to move across the world to somewhere that was foreign. You had to just adapt to something completely different. You switched majors, like you mentioned that you had to focus on your studies, and there was probably a lot of other things going on. So,
Yeah.
I mean, ultimately, you're still here. You're
Yeah.
software at Tesla, and I think that's pretty cool.
Thanks. At the time, it wasn't like such a big deal to me, but then like over time, I was like, oh my god, oh my god, oh my god. But then, you know, everything obviously turned out fine. But yeah, but thank you for saying that. That means a lot to me. I'm really glad that I have like friends like you, friends like Jeff to like support me.
Well, thank you for joining me on
Thanks
this
for
Sunday
having me
afternoon.
on
It was
Easter.
fun to talk to you. And we are now going to sign off and talk to you later. Thank you for listening into our first podcast.
I love it. All right, bye guys.
Bye.